And I remember this very clearly because he was still on the phone with the producer and he was like, "Oh yeah, man, never mind. I'm here with my man." And like he covered the phone and he's like, "What's your name?" I said, "Moses." He's like, "Yeah, I'm with my man Moses. He's walking me in right now." And I was like, "Oh fuck, that was so cool." And I'm like, "Oh, here we go." And he just like said thanks and went on his way. And that's how I met Kanye West.
Wow.
Damn.
Kanye called Moses
I know.
my man.
And he called him your name, like you said. He wanted to know your
Yeah.
name.
He
That's
called
the
you
most
by your
important
name.
part.
He called me by my name, yeah.
He didn't just say my man. I'm here with my
Yeah.
man.
And
Yeah.
that was the day I met Kanye
So-
West. That was pretty fun.
That's a good
Yeah.
day. It's a
Amazing.
good day. If you didn't know, guys, you're listening to the Kanye West podcast, where we just talk about all the stories in which we met Kanye West or saw him out in the open. It's a great podcast. It's usually only
About Kanye.
about
10
10
minutes
minutes long, you know, and we're only going to have probably one episode, and that's it. So thanks for listening.
Very
Yeah,
exclusive.
thanks for joining.
Goodbye.
Yeah. Hi and goodbye forever.
Bye forever. Well, if you didn't know, this is the One for Safety podcast. Now you do know, because I'm shouting it really loudly. Thanks for joining us on the actual podcast, which is One for Safety. And this week, we are going to be talking about open worlds. Open world video games specifically, not just open worlds, you know,
In
like
outer
planets.
space.
Wide open worlds.
Just like big
heard there's a lot
plains
of
of
those.
grass. There's a lot of plains.
We're talking about sweeping wide shots with the character standing right in the middle and the narrator going, "Vast open worlds for you to explore," and then like the E3 logo like swirls away.
Yeah. It's just all about trailers this week because E3's coming up. But for real, we're talking about.
E3's coming.
Is it really?
I know it's like next week or 2 weeks. It's
Oh,
really close.
interesting.
I think it's the next few weeks. Yeah. But for this episode, we're gonna be talking about open world video games, so we're excited to kind of dive into that. Before we do that, how you guys doing? I'm here with all the usual suspects: Leatrice, Phillip, and
Hi.
Moses. How you
Hi.
guys doing?
Good.
I'm doing good.
It's good.
Yeah, good, cool. Any other Kanye West stories you want to get out before we keep going?
No, but I saw Jake Gyllenhaal at a
Really?
nice new place.
That's the other podcast,
Mm.
Leatrice.
Yeah. Sorry.
I did see John Cho at a Chipotle in Pasadena.
I saw Jeremy Renner on set once, and we were told not to look at
Wow.
him.
Why not look at him?
Wow. They told you not to look at him?
Yeah, well, because like the PAs are always, you know, like the new kids
Yeah.
who like don't know how to handle themselves
Yeah,
on
yeah,
set.
yeah.
Because like a producer probably was like, if any of those fucking PAs like bother him, you know.
God.
I should tell you about how I work with James Franco.
Okay, no more stories about famous people.
Yeah, I
That's
just said
another.
it.
All right,
I
we're
literally
getting
just said
too
we'll
far
save it
into
for
this.
the
I could say the 3 times I saw Elijah Wood
Ooh,
in
that's an
random
even better
places.
story.
I can
Wait,
give my
come
Elijah
on.
Wood story.
You can't tease us like that, Alex.
That's
This-
for
this
another
can be
podcast
bonus-
where we talk
bonus
about
I saw Harrison Ford in Pasadena.
Harrison Ford.
Han Solo.
Everyone, that's actually kind of cool.
All right, let's move on.
Okay,
Let's move
we're
on.
moving on.
Jesus.
Besides,
You sound like the tourists
I
that come to California or come to LA and be like, "Did you see this person?"
you know who I
And
saw?
I'm like, "No, this is a big ass city. Don't."
Yeah, but how about my Childish Gambino sighting?
yeah.
Really, that's the most
That
important
was
one.
that was a good
Stop
one.
it.
That was a good one
We
too,
get
yeah.
it. You hang
That
out
was
with
a good
famous
one.
people all the time.
Stop it.
I hang out with them for only about 10 seconds as I see them run away.
I have superficial interactions and they don't remember me, but I remember them.
I remember them because I'm not important in their life. But you know what's important in our life is what we're drinking. So, hey, Moses, what do you tell me?
I'm actually really
What you
glad you asked me to go first because earlier today, Alex and I, we stopped by the Arroyo Shell, which is our new spot.
Sorry,
Yeah, I know,
Leatrice.
sorry. But
We were just
we just
betrayed.
we just went
Why'd
to
you ask?
We was-
a location scout, and I was like, you know what, I don't have anything for tonight's show, so let's stop by. And I went, and then
Not okay.
I know.
I'll never join you
Sorry.
guys again.
sorry, but
It's okay, y'all. Yeah.
this one I was very excited to, and I got this one because there's a picture on the can. I don't know if you guys can see it. I'm just gonna put it right here. It's O.J. Simpson in his Ford Bronco. And so I had to get it no matter what was inside. I had to get it and try it. But it's called The Juice is Triple. It's a triple IPA. And I don't know who the brewer is.
But that guy told you.
But he did
Didn't
say
Didn't he tell you to
he
pour it
did
in a
say
glass?
to pour it in a glass. So I have my newly frozen
okay.
glass
Hey.
here. So here we go. I'm gonna go
Hell
for it. Here we go.
yeah.
Nice.
Oh, okay. Here we go. Pouring it. You can't see it, but I'm pouring.
Lift it
Yeah,
up.
what are you doing? Show us. Show the people what they want.
Real
I want
content.
to see that OJ.
Give the people what they want.
All right, here we go.
That's a nice head right there.
Wow, it's really murky.
Yeah, that's
It's hazy.
It kind of does really taste like orange juice, but it's
Weird.
But it's
wow.
good.
Oh,
But I like it.
Nice.
Very
Hell yeah.
citrusy.
I'm here for that.
Yeah.
That
All
sounds
right.
good.
This is
I thought it was a stout the way he described it because he was like it's super thick and I was like, oh,
yeah.
okay. And
I mean,
then-
look at it. It looks
really
like orange
thick.
juice.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
but it's
crazy.
good.
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
orange creamsicle.
But no, it's delicious.
Yeah.
I like it.
Oh, how about that? The juice is loose.
Hey. Yeah.
Hmm.
Poor guy. Actually, not poor guy. You can cut that out. Never
No.
mind.
He's fine.
Yeah.
I think he's okay. I think he's okay.
Anyways, Phillip, what you got?
So I actually do have a stout.
Ooh.
I've got a Tsunami Export Stout from Pelican Brewing.
Pelican seems to be your place. Is this like the third one?
Second
one?
Second one. I guess I had one last time we met up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I was looking for a stout and Pelican Brewing.
Nice.
So yeah,
Hell
we're
yeah.
gonna go for
Hell
it.
yeah.
It's okay.
No.
It's not as good as the Irish Death. That one was. I think that's like probably one of my new favorite stouts.
I mean, with a name like that, you'd hope so. It's just like that's a great name.
And fun fact about that one, it's brewed in like this tiny podunk town where my sister went to college in Washington. Shout out to
Hell yeah.
Ellensburg.
Hey.
The 15 residents say, yes.
Alex, what are you drinking?
Well, it's not one from today because originally I hadn't planned to get anything, and I totally had forgot about this. Like I had bought it like a month ago, and it was in the back of my fridge, and I was like, oh shit, I need to drink that. And it's called Strawberry Illa. It's like a little ice cream
Wow, I
cone.
love that.
And it's a milkshake IPA.
Oh.
What's
Okay.
the color of my sweater?
I have no idea what that even means. Yeah, it's a nice pink. He's a little ice cream guy with a skull, and he's got some hops growing out of his head. You know?
You mean
I was
artichokes?
literally about to say
Are
that.
there artichokes?
Are those artichokes?
No, I think they're supposed to be
No,
hops.
they are.
Let me see.
I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. It's because
It's a throwback.
thanks, Moses.
I got you.
You know, it looks like artichokes, but hops
I know.
look like
I know.
artichokes.
Let me peep that can again.
Yeah. It's from Full Circle Brewing.
Oh, those are hops.
Yeah, it's gonna taste like artichokes.
Hey,
Here we
artichokes
go.
taste amazing, sir.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. I love art. I was just saying the other day when we were at the grocery store, I was like, man, we should get some artichokes.
You know, I find it weird that for some people who eat asparagus, their pee doesn't smell, and for some it does.
It does for me.
Hmm.
Huh.
It also does.
Yeah, it's
for me.
like it means your body can't process a certain chemical in the asparagus.
It means you're weak.
So does that mean I'm dying? what's going on?
I don't know.
No, I think it's like a genetic
No, I
thing.
think it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, it's a genetic thing.
I don't think it's the asparagus that's gonna make you die, dude.
It's probably the alcohol we
It's
drink
the
every
triple
week,
juice.
maybe.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, it's that juice. All right, here we go.
All right, sorry, Alex.
That's
Go ahead.
blame it on the juice.
The juice is loose.
Blame it on the juice.
Well, that's actually pretty good. That tastes like a
Is
milkshake.
it is it nice and thick like a milkshake?
No,
No.
It's
It's
not.
All right.
No.
Yeah, no, it's not a milkshake in there. That'd be
So
weird.
no C's in that thick, huh?
No, it's pretty sealess. It's got like a little thing because there's different versions and it tells you like the color, the malt. I wonder what the color's like. Is it actually pink? Oh man, should I go grab a glass really quick to see if it's pink?
Do it.
Yeah, go. All right, someone make a joke about Alex, and then I'll keep it in there, and he'll never know. And then until
Alex is a
episode plays.
fucking nerd.
He's gonna come back and be like, I heard that.
I love Alex so much.
All right, here we go. Look at this shit. Look at that.
Oh, it is pink.
Whoa.
That
I like
shit's
that color.
pink. Anyway,
So today's topic, I may not have much to say. So I decided that I'm just going to drink. And I wanted it to be a classy kind of drinking night, so I got 4 different bottles of whiskey.
Christ.
Except that I realized, well, I just took them from my brother. The first one, my housemate actually made for me. It's with a bullet, kind of basic, but he put some orange peels in here.
Classy.
A splash of Angostura, so it's a makeshift old fashioned, and I've already had it, so it's pretty good. But I'm gonna show you the other 2 bottles. I mean 3, not 3.
Uh-oh, she's already drunk.
Okay.
Larceny.
This
Larceny.
one is Larceny.
Larson.
Yeah.
That's a good name for a
Kentucky
whiskey.
straight bourbon whiskey. You've had it, Alex?
I have not had it.
either.
I have not had it.
Okay,
Oh.
so that's number 2 for later.
What crime is larceny? Is it stealing?
Stealing.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, continue.
All right, number 3 will be a Grangestone.
Grangestone.
Grangestone?
Grangestone.
Grangestone. But yeah, this one's a Scotch, so that will be for later. And then my 4th bottle.
Oh my god.
Old
Forster. Yeah, I've heard of.
Wow.
I've heard of Old
Yeah.
Forster. Yeah. So is the plan?
Forester.
Are they all old fashions? Or are you gonna like do these other ones straight after the old fashioned?
No, I'm gonna do the rest of them straight. So this is just the first one because I came home and he had already made it and he offered it to me. So I
You're gonna drain
Alright.
all 4 of those bottles before this is over, right?
drain. No, I would die.
Yeah. You know, what I forgot to mention, guys. I'm just gonna mention right now. This is episode 25,
This is
guys.
episode
This is
25,
we're
yeah.
a quarter of a century,
Oh,
by
yeah,
the way.
baby.
I should have mentioned them at the beginning,
century.
but before we keep going further. It's an exciting milestone. So thank you to all listeners who made it this far with us and continue.
We
to
should all do a
listen.
cheers.
Yeah.
A cheers.
We
real quick.
appreciate your support.
Yeah, so let's do a cheers on that with our
Cheers.
25th. What are we having?
Awesome.
Clink, 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 clink. All right, moving on from what we're having. This week we actually do not have an artist spotlight, but if you would like to be shout out, we'd love for any suggestions. If you as a listener have someone you want us to shout out, please send it in. We'd love to shout out as many people as we can. Just this week, because of the short week, we didn't have a chance to actually get one in time for the podcast. So if you as a listener have anyone you want us to shout out, please send it in. Or if you as an artist want to send your stuff, we'd love to see it and we'd love to shout you out. So yeah, please send in any submissions that you'd like. But then moving on to our weekly obsessions. Does anyone have any this week?
I see Philip's hand.
I'll go first.
Yeah.
My weekly obsession is Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Hey.
Actually,
Oh.
surprisingly.
Oh wow.
Um, I watched it all on Sunday.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So,
Jeez.
And here we are back on Marvel.
Serena was my girlfriend was out of town for the weekend, and so it was just me.
Don't you just love that?
And
Mhm.
I Saturday night I started the first episode, but I was tired and only made it through like halfway through the first episode. And Sunday was supposed to be like my day where I was just gonna cut the whole podcast. So like I woke up Sunday morning and I was like, well, what do I have to do today? I guess I just have the podcast to edit. So then I was like, well, I guess I'll just finish this. It's only like 7:00 in the morning. So I like watched the second half of the first episode, finished it. And then I was like, well, it's only 8:00 in the morning. I can watch this next episode. And then it was like, well, then it's only 9. And then it was 1:30 in the afternoon and I was still watching and I finished it. Needless to say, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Nice.
I know it's getting kind of like mixed reviews, but like I thought it was fun. I thought that Anthony Mackie and Sebastian Stan did a like bang up job. Like the two of them work really well together on screen. And I was pretty excited to see the way they approached making Falcon become, spoiler, Captain America. I mean, we all saw it coming, but I think that they could have really easily just taken that for granted and like made it happen and then not said anything about it. But instead they kind of took the approach of like, let's have that conversation about like what this means and like the weight of that decision on a black man to take that like name and icon and like become that, and how people are going to receive that. And I think that they did a pretty good job about having that conversation, and I'm just pretty happy to see that. So I give it Captain America stars out of 5.
One big star?
One big star out of 5.
Oh God. So I shouldn't watch it.
One big vibranium star out of one big vibranium star.
Anyway, who wants to go next?
I'll go.
If they have one. Okay.
So my
Okay.
obsession this week has been Starbucks shaken espresso.
I just love how sad. I don't know why he sounded so sad saying
Because
that.
it's like
know why.
Like you didn't want to
yeah,
admit
because
it.
it's Starbucks,
It's
and
not-
you know, it's just a major corporation kind of thing. But it's so good.
Yo, call back to my pumpkin spice
I know.
latte session.
But it's so
okay.
good.
It happens.
I like it. I like it a lot.
But I didn't. What is a shaken
It's
espresso?
basically 3 shots of espresso with a little bit of milk and ice, and then you got a good jump start to the day.
It's not that. It doesn't taste that
It's not
strong
that strong,
though.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's good.
Three shots isn't really that much actually when you think about it. Like usually when you get a shot of espresso at a place, right? They give you a double. Like that's normal.
Yeah.
So
In California, yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, that's
Sorry,
what I've got going on. That's my obsession this week.
You know what you missed because you just got into it is there was a brown sugar version of it, and that shit was like
Really?
it was so good, and they got rid of it. I don't know what happened. Apparently, all the tick.
Wait, do they actually shake it though? Do they at least shake it?
Not really, actually.
Why is it called a shaken?
I think
espresso?
you're supposed to shake it. They don't shake it.
In what the flimsy plastic cup?
I've done it
cup
before.
that they
I've
give
done
with
I've
the-
done like my little little shake move.
Oh, I was thinking like the bartender
Oh.
shake. You know. Like,
Nah, you can't. They ask. Usually, you should get a straw because you can. Like,
Swirl it.
that's
Mix
a weird
it.
move. Yes, do a little swirl shake. But yeah, they had a brown sugar one. I think all the TikTokers were like talking about it and are talking about it.
They're TikToking about it.
No, just
Oh, that's what that was. Okay, I missed that.
I'm leaving. I'm done. I can't do this.
All right. Now that Philip's gone, we can talk about.
Let's
Kanye
get back
West
to the
more.
real problems.
So,
And the real, but yeah, I think TikTok took it over. I think I got one. There's this YouTube channel called Wrestle with Andy. I don't know why it's not gonna be like that's just a really weird name. It's not gonna be about like this guy Andy wrestling or anything. He makes these like actually really cool like 20 to 30 minute long like documentaries about like WWF
oh,
or
I've
WWE
seen that.
wrestlers.
I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're really pretty damn good. They're like really well thought out, like, and he gets into the kind of like history of people that you wouldn't necessarily like know. And he's done like a shit ton of people. I haven't seen that many, but just this week I started watching a few of them, and I did like the classic one, like a Stone Cold Steve Austin, and there's like some really funny, insightful things that you like never would have known, or like didn't like if you just don't know his history. Like Stone Cold's like a really interesting dude, like his career path and like what led to where he was and like how he got to his fame.
Yeah.
And like he used to not be that kind of wrestler, and he used to be like a technical wrestler back in the day.
He was the ringmaster.
Yeah, and then and then he went to Steve
Yeah.
Austin because some guy gave him that name based on the $6 million man. And the name Stone Cold came from his wife apparently, because one time she gave him tea and said, "Better drink that before it becomes stone cold,"
Really?
and that's how they got the name.
Oh.
Well, going back
That's
to the
cute.
Steve
And-
Austin thing, so $6 Million Man reference, right? But when he was the ringmaster, his manager was Ted DiBiase, who was the $1 Million Man.
Yeah, what?
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tim DiBiase.
Oh.
Yeah, but that's just Stone Cold. I
Yeah.
mean, Stone Cold's a really interesting one just because he's like so famous, and he's like the most famous one of all of them,
Yeah.
probably.
If-
but he has like
If
all
you
of them. Like you can
if
watch
you
them.
want to like
Hmm?
cry over how like unfortunate someone's career became, watch the Jake the Snake one. That one was like, fuck, that sucks.
Okay, I'll check it
Yeah.
out. Yeah, I'm sure he has that up. But yeah, that one's probably cool. I'm sure like an Owen Hart one exists. Owen Hart would be really sad and
yeah.
tragic. But yeah, if you're into wrestling, I think it's a really cool, fun thing just to learn about more than just like the obvious, because the obvious like pageantry
Yeah.
of it. In some ways, there's like a really cool, interesting behind the scenes of everything. But yeah, that is that. So Leatrice, you don't have one, so I guess that means we can move on to the topic of the show. So today, like I already mentioned, is about open world video games and whether or not we, which ones we like, which ones we don't like, the argument for against, and just whether or not, like we think there can be improvement in some or whatever, open worlds. So before we start though, I wanted to give a quick definition. So this is what Wikipedia at least defines as an open world video game. In video games, an open world is a game mechanic of using a virtual world that the player can explore and approach objectives freely, as opposed to a world with more linear and structured gameplay. So before we kind of move on, which games do you consider as an open world? Like I put as an example, like God of War, Grand Theft Auto, Spider-Man, etc.
There's kind of like, I feel like there's levels of open worldness in a way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like, I guess I never played Red Dead Redemption, but I feel like that world is humongous, from what I've heard.
It is.
And then if I compare, like I said, I've never played it, so it's hard for me to compare. But if I think of like God of War, and that's an open world, I like that because it's pretty open, but it's not exactly super huge, I feel.
So
I think building on that, yeah, there's definitely like a spectrum of open worlds. I think God of War sits somewhere squarely in the middle, because open worlds kind of, if you want to kind of like go back in the day, like you almost have like hub worlds, which are kind of these like proto open worlds where, you know, you have like a hub and then you go into levels, sort of like if you like Mario 64 back on the Nintendo 64 was like an early kind of like proto type of what an open world could be, or like Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, pretty much all of the Zelda games, like from the beginning, have been open worlds, but not in the way that we kind of think of them in a contemporary sense. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have the huge, vast open worlds when we think of like Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead Redemption, Spider-Man, every Ubisoft game for some reason.
Yeah. So I think that the reason why I ask about at least games like God of War is like, I don't actually think that it's considered an open world. And when I looked it up, because that was one that I started to think about too, because for a long time I considered that an open world. And then I realized that, that I don't think people consider it one, which is really interesting, because I guess it has elements of an open world, but because it's still like there is a linearness to it, you know, in a way, like there is like objectives, but you're not really like, the difference between like what you mentioned, like a Red Dead Redemption or like a Breath of the Wild, is like you literally have full exploration abilities and you just like take off and do whatever the fuck you want. Whereas God of War is like you're kind of still encased in this very small thing that you kind of just do these objectives that are still not really allowing you to explore in the same way.
So I think that God of War kind of falls somewhere between an open world and this other kind of subgenre of open worlds called wide linear. It's this new term that people are using to describe games kind of like The Last of Us Part 2 specifically, because Part 1 is definitely linear, but game design is starting to get a little bit wider even in linear games, because people just want options in the way that they approach things. It's no longer enough to have a game that's like stealth only, right? Like people want Metal Gear Solid 5 to give you as many different ways to approach your target as possible. And I think that really contrasts with the idea of linear game design. And so you're starting to see this hodgepodge, like hybrid between open worlds and linear games. And I think like God of War is the ideal example of that, because God of War, I think it has like a hub world in a way, but it's like a really vast hub world in comparison to what we traditionally think of as a hub world. In my mind, when I think of a hub world, I think of like 10 doors and like 2 NPCs that you can talk to. But God of War took that to like a whole nother level, where their hub world is like large, vast, and really interesting. But you still do have these like linear sections of the game where, you know, you're going to Niflheim. That's the only one that I can remember right now.
Yeah. Because in some ways that's just like, it's like a glorified way of looking at levels, right? Like when you play like more linear game, it's like it's a level you're playing, but it's just giving you more exploration abilities. But in the end, it's still just another level of that game, even if it is a hub. So I guess in some ways, it's hard to find that as an open world. But games like Grand Theft Auto, we can agree on. Ghost of Tsushima, more recently.
It's interesting that you say that, actually, because in a way, I think that like open worlds are just kind of like a slightly more evolved version of that, where like you have missions that have markers that are on a map that you go to, and then especially with Rockstar games, you play linear levels within these open worlds, which I think is something that we're probably going to touch on a little bit later, but I think that's something that kind of detracts from the nature of open world games. But I digress. We can keep talking.
We'll get into it. It's fine. Yeah, no, that's fine. No, but I agree. That's why it's like hard to know what is a true open world. I guess it's like when it allows you to explore, and there is missions in some ways, but the allowing you to still not have to, like, you can still do other things that aren't mission related. I feel like tends to be, to me, what more of an open world is like. That's why I love like games like Yakuza. Like, I would consider that an open world. It's not huge, but you can explore. There's so many fucking little things you could do. The world feels really alive, but it's a very small map in comparison to games like Red Dead or Grand Theft Auto or I don't even know, even something like Spider-Man. It's not that big, but I'd say there's way more to do. Yeah, in comparison than like Spider-Man. Like Spider-Man, there's very limited amount of things to do. But like in a game like Yakuza, it's like you go any corner in that game and there's like fucking 5 mini games or some shit, you know? There's some random shit happening. So I guess moving on from that though, what are some of your favorite open world games?
Dang. I can't even say it.
Bang?
No, I said dang.
Oh, bang.
I don't know. I guess would Metal Gear Solid be considered open world, like a true
MGS5?
Yeah.
5? I would say so.
You think so?
I consider it an open world.
I mean, I haven't really played that many open worlds, but then I guess let's see, Breath of the Wild. Would you say that was?
Oh yeah, 100%.
100%. That is
definitely open world.
I think that's like the purest definition that I can think of, short of Minecraft, of an open world game.
Then I'm probably gonna go with Breath of the Wild, because as much as I love Metal Gear Solid and that franchise, the last one I just didn't really like that much, and part of it is because of that open world, almost mission based aspect of it. Like I didn't like it. Like I liked the linear or the linear aspect.
Linearity.
Yeah, exactly. The linear aspect of what needs to be done, which I felt like they got right with Metal Gear Solid 4.
Yeah, 100%.
But Breath of the Wild, I thoroughly enjoyed.
I mean, I think I'm gonna have to go with Breath of the Wild as far as open world games go. I'm pretty much not a huge fan of open world games in general. I think that the demand for them has created this sort of like saturation in the market of bad open worlds, of games that don't need open worlds, because big companies think that like just because kids want it, then that means that your game has to have it. But I think that Breath of the Wild was one of the first times where I played a game that was open world, that felt like it really was built from the ground up to be an open world. I think a lot of like Ubisoft games, and like especially you're saying Metal Gear Solid 5, they feel like they had to be open worlds because that's what people want. But like Breath of the Wild is a game that people want because it's an open world game.
Interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's definitely its main strength is the fact that it feels so open and vast, and like you're on this adventure. It feels like the most adventure game ever. Like you just kind of like it's like you can go and you can do whatever you want. You can go and do the straight mission if you want to, but there's so much interesting things around every corner to do, and it feels so alive and interesting. Breath of the Wild is definitely a great example of it. I think for me, is that the only one you're gonna say? Just Breath of the Wild?
Oh, for me?
Yeah, I don't know if you want to say any other ones before I jump. Leatrice is now on her second drink. By the way, I'm gonna keep track of when Leatrice goes for another drink. So
actually, now that I think about it, the original Assassin's Creed.
I don't
Assassin's
remember
Creed
it enough.
and
That's
Assassin's
crazy.
Creed Brotherhood. Those games were. I think Assassin's Creed was like one of the first real open world games that I experienced, and
Yeah.
like that shit was rad. That was so cool just to be able to like walk around. I think it was Jerusalem at the time because it was like Crusader age Jerusalem, and you know
Yeah.
being able to like crawl up whatever buildings you wanted and like kill whatever guards you
Jump in
wanted.
the
And
haystack everywhere.
yeah, there was this like freedom of movement that was so new at the time. That was really exciting.
For me, like, again, everyone can agree on Breath of the Wild, but I think like Red Dead Redemption, you're about to bring up Ghost of Tsushima. I think recently Ghost of Tsushima would be high on that list. That's a really amazing open world that's really alive and interesting. I gotta give the love why this whole conversation even started was The Witcher 3 talk. And Witcher 3 still is on top of my list is one of the most interesting open world games, whether Phillip likes it or not. And I think I'm not alone in that thought. Yeah, Witcher 3. I'm trying to think if there's any other ones. I mean, there's so many amazing moments in Red Dead Redemption 2. Where I've like literally just gotten lost. Like it's so detailed. Like that one city. It's been a while since I played the game. Saint Denis, I think, is the big city in that game. That's supposed to be kind of like a French Quarter type place.
Kind of like New Orleans.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I remember like one time, and this is like where this is like what makes I think open world so cool. Is like I just like wandered in that game. Like I didn't even like try to do anything. I just like wanted to see what the NPCs were up to on their day, and I was like walking around that like Saint Denis, and it's like so detailed and vast and interesting that I'm just like, good lord, the amount of detail that goes into just like this game and like how amazing this all feels is just so impressive.
So in a game like that,
I was
are
really
you just playing like a bunch of different side missions, or
No, there's definitely a main storyline you're following. What's his name? Arthur Morgan is like the main character, and like you are following his story. But as the story progresses, you get to further places in that game. And while you're doing, there's other side missions. It's like any other open world thing, right? Like especially Rockstar style game where there's just like anywhere you go, there's probably something to do in terms of side missions, or even if it's not like a side mission, there's probably some animal you can hunt. Or weird shit that's going on constantly in that world, and then there is the main mission that you could follow as well.
I see.
But yeah, it's really interesting. And after I mean, I'm not going to spoil that game because it's great. But yeah, even after the story progresses, there is like a kind of epilogue, and then you can kind of just keep playing, and it just allows you to keep going. So Leatrice, I don't know if you're adding to this, but is there anything that you like in terms of open worlds? Do you play any open worlds that you would say over here?
No, I don't. I've not played, but I like watching the gameplays of these open world games, just cause it's fun to see where people take it. And then for me, I get really, I don't know. As a non open world gamer, I'm wondering what is the major draw really for you guys.
Yeah, I was about to say, is it just like
Sure.
the variability of gameplay that each day is kind of different?
So is the question,
because you're not in it just for the storytelling aspect, right? It's something
Right.
else that keeps you in it.
so wait,
So what is
is
it?
the question is what keeps you, why are open worlds so attractive to the gamer?
Yeah, I guess. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think if you like a world enough, there is a draw to want to stay in that world and explore it as much as possible. I think exploring is the main thing about open worlds that make it so good, and reasons why some open worlds I find are not so great. And like the reasons why I didn't like Spider-Man, for instance, is I find that at a certain point the game is boring because there's really not much to do except for swinging around and like occasionally doing side missions. But at a certain point, you're like, this world is boring. I can't just walk into any random thing and there be some new adventure or some new thing. And that's what makes games like Breath of the Wild so attractive and to play, and Red Dead Redemption and Ghost. Even
What's the difference though? Like, let's say a person has never played Breath of the Wild. What makes Breath of the Wild so special?
I think the thing that makes Breath of the Wild stand out from a lot of other open worlds is a lot of like subtle game design choices that they went about to make the game that really distinguish itself from other open world games. So one of like the biggest tropes in open world games is climbing to the highest point in an area and then looking out, and then all of the quest markers within that area just like populate on your map, and you see all of the things that the world has to offer. And from like speaking personally, that's usually ends up being kind of a big turnoff for me, because I'm kind of like this, I'm like almost a completionist, but I don't tend to finish things because I get bored. So like when you have an open world that has, 1,000 things to do in it, and it tells you, and it gives you a laundry list of 1,000 things to do in it, and when you start like checking off your checkboard, really for me it becomes this like chore almost of like just checking off the boxes of getting these side missions done. And at some point, like, I lose interest because the missions are repetitive, the side missions aren't interesting, or like the gameplay is kind of boring, or for some other reason I stop playing it. Whereas I think what Breath of the Wild did that's really smart is that they really don't have any quest markers except for like very, very, very minimal quest markers. And so it encourages you to explore the world. And when you do that trope of climbing up the towers and like getting the area, it doesn't actually give you all of the locations of things. It just gives you a more detailed like topographical map of the area that you're in. And then it doesn't tell you where to go. It doesn't tell you where these towers are. It like forces you to be where you're at. And so every hill in the game becomes something exciting. There could be something exciting on the other side of it. And even though like maybe like 60% of the time it's going to be something that you've seen before, like an enemy camp, a horse tent, a trader, it's things that we've seen before. But because you don't know going in, it creates the sense of excitement and a sense of discovery because you fill that map in. And I think that is what distinguishes Breath of the Wild from every other open world game.
Yeah. And I think adversity,
So
I
how
know,
do you know when it's done?
there
no way.
in that case there are limits to certain things. Like they tell you like how many of the little shrines there are, I think. So there are like limits eventually. But it encourages finding those things instead of giving you a marker on an open world. And most open worlds, it does that. That's why I think also Ghost of Tsushima does really well, because there's the fog of war, and you kind of have to, you're almost encouraged to like, I have to get on my horse and ride the fuck out there and hopefully find these things. And then the only way it actually opens up is like, oh, I defeated an enemy camp, and then it shows you more of the map after that. And then it's like, okay, cool, I have to keep doing that over and over and over again. Yeah. So it makes exploring a better thing to do. And again, I think that's why some games don't get that right. Like I agree on that point for sure. Like this idea of I gotta climb to a thing and scan the area and then go, okay, that's all the things that are in this area. Is kind of boring. And yeah, I definitely agree on that point for sure. I guess to talk about other things we don't like, are there any open worlds you don't like, or what are the things that make a bad open world?
I think
to you guys,
either repetitive content or too much content. Actually, I don't even think that like too much content necessarily makes for a bad game, because like that's my gripe with Witcher 3. It's not even that it's a bad game. I think everything about it functionally works. It's just like overwhelming for me, and at some point like I'm just not interested anymore. And I think like that for me is probably the biggest detractor to open world games, is when they have a core narrative in them.
Moses, did you want to say something?
Yeah, mine is kind of like just an annoying aspect of it is like, with Breath of the Wild, I can't even remember. It's been so long since I played it. Was there like a teleport option in Breath of the Wild? I do not remember.
Yeah, there was a fast travel option.
Okay.
I think you teleport to the towers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You can teleport to towers and shrines, I think.
Yeah, once you've completed them.
Yeah, I think I'm just in the same camp as like Phillip. If there's just too much to do, I just not get bored, but I just lose focus. I'm just like, oh man, there's just so much to do. Like I already beat the game. Like what am I gonna accomplish by finishing all, other than like, the satisfaction of like, yes, I got 100% of the game. So I guess that's my only thing, is if it's too big, I just kind of lose interest, especially if I like already beat the core narrative of the game.
I was gonna say, but it's funny that, and I get what you guys are saying, and I agree to some extent, is that like, yeah, if there's too much and you feel like you're just trying to be a completionist and you're just trying to do the story, it can be a little taxing to go, okay, how much more fucking things do I have to do in this place? But essentially, isn't that like the point? Is like that they're making these games so massive because they want the player to enjoy as much time in the world. So I guess in some ways too much isn't a bad thing, because there's people I know that like love staying in these worlds. Like I remember seeing some crazy story about some guy who like played The Witcher for like 1,000 hours or something. Like he like kept going back and replaying it and trying everything, and he would go to a certain place and fight the same thing at a different time of day to see how it looked differently. Like, oh, it looked different at sunset and it looked different at night, and like just to experience every aspect of it. And like there's something kind of beautiful about that if you like love the game so much. You know, it's like people, we don't give shit to people who play Call of Duty or Fortnite all the time, but they're playing the same fucking map over and over and over again, but just in a multiplayer setting. But if someone wants to enjoy an open world over and over and over again, isn't it the same kind of like, shouldn't we allow that? Or
I mean,
you know, not allow it, but like encourage it. Like it should be kind of
like I said, that's that person. Personally, I wouldn't care less if it looked different if I played a level at a different time. But I mean,
sure, I wouldn't either.
Exactly. But I mean, if that's what that person likes to do, then yeah, sure, I can definitely see that. But like I said, speaking personally, I just think too much is just. There's other things to do than spend 1,000 hours playing the game.
I mean, I think too, like, there's an issue. I don't have an issue with somebody wanting to play a video game for 1,000 hours, wanting to find all the different things and all the subtle details that designers have put into the game. Like, I think that's awesome, but I also think there's kind of a problem that probably about 80% of single player games that are coming out today are catering to that audience. Like they are building, they think that if you make a single player game that doesn't offer multiplayer options that you can play for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, that way that like you can't tell a story because people aren't going to want to play it. And I think that like Metal Gear Solid 5 is the perfect example of that, of like the world at the time that Metal Gear Solid 5 was like, everybody wants open world everything. And so they felt like they had to make, and maybe they didn't, but like I always got the sense that they felt like they needed to make it an open world because that was what was like popular at the time that it came out. And I think that Metal Gear Solid 5 really suffered because of it, because Metal Gear Solid has always been a narrative driven game. Like Kojima has always just wanted to make movies and he uses his games to make movies. And there's like this contrast in experience between an open world like game design and a linear narrative, because I could not tell you what Metal Gear Solid 5 was about past that it was about like big or Naked Snake becoming Big Boss. Like I don't know what happened in that game because you had to play like 5 hours of content before you got any story, and then the story that did happen was in like dead drops that you find. It's like hidden throughout the world and you have to like search for it. Like I don't want to have to like work for my Metal Gear Solid story. I want to sit back and like eat popcorn and sneak around corners to get it. And what happened was that like you ended up with a game that had really repetitive, really great stealth gameplay in a world that was like completely empty. Like most of that game is just like literal desert. It's like literally a desert and there's nothing to do there. And then you just walk to the next base, and the base easily could have just been like lifted out of the open world and you could have been dropped in a helicopter like 200 meters away from it, and you pretty much would have the exact same experience.
Yeah. I mean, if you thought that was open and there was nothing there, you should definitely play Death Stranding, because that's literally, there's nothing fucking there. It's like bases spread out over massive areas.
Hideo just
it's
expanding right there.
No, I think it was a Kojima thing. Like he wanted to make a world because and it's really interesting. It's funny, like Death Stranding is like one of the most beautiful games I've ever played. Like it's genuinely a very beautiful game. But it's one of the most like bizarre and weird, and like in the end when I got to like 30 or 40 hours in, I took that moment and like sat back and I was like, wait a minute, I'm just like a glorified UPS guy. I'm like, fuck this. And I just like, I had been playing side missions and I was like, fuck this. I'm just playing the story. And I just like moved on, you know?
I almost wonder.
But it was real.
I almost wonder like if he was inspired to make Death Stranding based on his experience making Metal Gear Solid 5 in the way that like empty open worlds made him think about game design, and like if that somehow grew into Death Stranding. Because from what I've heard, I've still never played it, but like everybody talks about how like empty the open world and like almost like unnecessary the open world of Death Stranding is. But I feel like it sounds so almost like comically empty, or like that it's almost like a commentary on open world games in a way.
It is actually, to be honest, even though I'm being critical of it, it does do something that's really, really intriguing. As the more you play, the more connected the world becomes. So by the beginning of the game, to get to one place, like if I was like gonna go from one base to the next base, it's like a fucking huge journey. Like you gotta like go over fucking rocks and mountains and like do all this shit, and it's like wild, and you gotta carry shit on your back, and then like look out for crazy weird ghost guys and shit, and like you got your baby on you and he's crying, and it's crazy. Like it's really difficult to get from one place to the next. But by the end of the game, because the game is about you literally connecting all the bases with like roads and like these crazy like zip line things. So by the end, I could get from like one end of the map to the other end of the map like in like minutes, like where it used to take me like hours, you know, like to get from one side to the other because it was so difficult. So it is kind of that. It is a commentary, I think, on the open world and the connectiveness, and there is a lot of interesting things he's saying about the gameplay. And so I definitely don't hate the game. It's just like at some point you're like, man, this is kind of boring, and like I just want to move on with the story, because the story is interesting, but it's just the gameplay mechanics kind of wear you down at some point. So I guess just to move on, because you know, that's enough about Kojima, even though we love Kojima. Is there a perfect size open world? Like, do you guys think that is there a game that you're like, that's the size?
I think that's such I think to me, asking if there's a perfect size open world kind of is like asking if like, is there an ideal way to shoot something? And like, no, right? Like there are no rules in cinematography. Like there's no rules in game design. There's like suggestions at the end of the day. And it's like, once you understand those guidelines, then it really becomes about like tweaking it and fixing it and making it tailor-made to your game. So I guess like, in my opinion, like the perfect size open world is the size that the game needs it to be.
Yeah, I think just to jump on that, like I feel, you know, God of War on PS4, it felt amazing to me, because obviously there was that level of linear activity that needed to happen, but then like you could also explore, you know, the world around you. Granted, you couldn't get access to a lot of it until you like, you know, explore other places, which is fine, you know. But I think once I beat the game and I went back to do, you know, some of the labors they call it, and I appreciated the fact that the game actually looked different, considering that you already beat it. So once you beat the game, it starts snowing, right? And that's like the Fimbul winter, the start of Ragnarok. And that's just like a little detail that I thought was like, hey, that's pretty great. It's basically saying like, yeah, you can still, you know, do everything around, but knowing that the story is already like over. So yeah, I really appreciated what God of War did in that aspect, because I feel like it was big, but there weren't a lot of like labors that were just so many that I would lose focus. So if I had to pick one, I think God of War did it really well.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. I think that like if there's one that I can think of that was like the perfect sized open world, it was God of War. But that's
again,
also
even though again, backtracking, it did say that people don't really necessarily call it an open world, and I think even the creator, I think I read somewhere, he's saying it's like not an open world in his mind.
Yeah, but like it is an open world. Like that's the thing.
But it's not. If the creator's saying, but if the creator's
The
saying it's
creator
not
can
an
say
open
whatever
world,
he wants. It's an open world.
I mean, what? Like, that's not how that works. Like if he's saying he's not creating an open world, it's not an open world. I mean, it doesn't even fall into the definition necessarily.
I mean, I think that like the definition for open world is already so flimsy. Like
That's why I started the podcast with the definition. I feel like it's not that flimsy. There's a very
Well,
clear idea
if we're gonna go by that,
open
then
worlds
I
are.
feel like the consensus is just Breath of the Wild.
It's perfect size.
Yeah, I didn't think it was that big because, like I said,
an open world like game mechanic of using a
Well,
virtual world that the player can explore and approach objectives freely. Yeah, I mean, you can approach objectives in God of War.
But I
Kinda how
think
you
what
want.
Alex is trying to say is you can do that, but you really can't like advance on those without having like certain things done already. So
Yeah.
like
I think it is. It's very linear in.
Yeah,
God of
so
War.
like you can't
things open
yeah,
when
you can't
do
go to
things.
Helheim until you get like the Blades of Chaos, but you can't
Yeah.
get the Blades of Chaos until you do this. So yeah,
That's what I mean. Yeah. Whereas like if you went into Breath of the
Yeah,
Wild,
but you
I
can
go
make
to
the
any
same argument
place.
for like Red Dead Redemption. Like you can't do certain story missions until you do other certain story missions, right?
No,
Same
you can
thing
go
with
anywhere
like
you want in that game. You can go anywhere in that game. I can go to Saint Denis.
no,
if I
you
wanted
can
to. I don't
go
have-
you can go anywhere, but like you can't, like there are certain missions that you can't go to, which means that there are certain areas of the map that you can't go into.
So
Same with The Witcher.
No,
like-
I think you can pretty much go to any place.
So-
you want
But
to
like
go.
okay,
Except
so like The
God of
Witcher
War,
3
you literally are.
Witcher 3 is
cut
an
off.
open world.
Yeah.
Okay. Witcher 3
I knew I should have worn a referee.
Witcher 3 is an open world, but like there are certain areas that you cannot go to until you do certain things. So like doesn't that already break your definition?
No, but then there's multiple maps
then-
in that. So I think the first
Yeah,
world is an open world, and then the second world is an open world. I mean, like, if you're looking at it from scaling size, if you're saying that like technically you comparing the size of the second map of Witcher 3 to like one of the small like levels in God of War as comparing those two,
No.
then I guess yeah.
Well,
but I am
'Cause then
saying that like the hub world.
I'm agreeing with you, by the way. I'm agreeing with you in this. I'm saying then yes, in theory, those two would be, but I feel like the idea of exploration that you do in The Witcher 3 comparatively to God of War is very limited. Like you really can't do things after a certain point. Like you were stuck at a place where like Witcher 3 you can explore from one end of the map, whatever map you're on. And there is that more of that exploration aspect
So-
to it.
Yeah.
That's what I think to me means
is
open
it safe
world.
to say?
Because like especially last thing, especially when you're saying that like the perfect definition of an open world is Zelda, right? That idea of the ride was perfect is the exploration aspect.
Well,
of
I
it.
meant like is like the purest definition. Like it's just like a distilled open world, and there's a
No,
difference.
I know. Okay,
It's not like
sorry,
the
Moses, go
perfect
ahead.
No,
open world.
Because
like,
I was just gonna say, if could an open world be as soon as you start, could you go to the final boss and play the final boss right away? Would that be
But,
a
like,
good
I
definition
think-
of open world? Because you
I
can
don't think
essentially
so,
do everything.
because-
I didn't say you can
No.
beat him, but you have the option to do it. Would that be?
But like that would narrow the list down to like Legend of Zelda, and like that's about
That's
it.
true. Yeah, because like Ghost of Tsushima, for instance, is an open world, but you literally can't go to the next section until you kill.
So then,
somebody
is it even
Yeah.
really?
You do in a
an open
battle.
world?
Well,
Yeah, I
like
think
that's
that
what
one
I
is
mean
too.
is like it's kind of a spectrum. Like I think that it's sort of that's the point that I'm making is sort of a flimsy definition, and I feel like God of War is like very, very, very just barely squeezing itself in with the definition of an open world, but it's like wide linear. Which is like the bare minimum of the open world. It's like just barely touching into the open world area. And for me, that's exactly as much open world as I need in my story driven games. But that's also coming from somebody who doesn't like open worlds to begin with. Like I just don't think that they're necessary. I think a lot of them are really empty and boring and repetitive. And I think God of War did it right by creating a world that was big enough for me to want to explore it, small enough for me to explore all of it, and narrow enough that I'm still being pushed towards the linear story ending.
Leatrice is on her third drink, by the way. Yeah, I agree. It's funny because you started this section of this where I was immediately going to agree with you, and then to the God of War thing, I was going to go, yeah, I agree. Like it depends on like the story is what makes the size of the open world. Because like to me again, like I think the perfect open world is Yakuza. I'm like my Yakuza love knows no bounds. Yakuza is amazing, and you all should play it, and especially you if you don't like open worlds, because I think that is like perfect. Because that to me is like definitely considered to me open world. But it's like just big enough where you're not overwhelmed, and just small enough where you could kind of just like interesting enough and expansive enough that there's always something new to do, and the story is interesting enough that drives you through it, but you really could just do whatever the fuck you want. Go play some mahjong or do whatever. Go play some golf or whatever. It's amazing. It's a great game. You should definitely play the game. Anyway, it's not the Yakuza Love Hour, but I agree that the story depends. Like I think Zelda is perfect for its size. I think that Red Dead Redemption is great for its size. I think if we're gonna throw God of War back into this thing, which is fine, God of War is perfect for its size, and I love God of War, so I agree in that too. And yeah, I think sometimes that like the one I don't think, again, I'm gonna keep this is still like this is becoming the Spider-Man hate hour for me. Is I think Spider-Man didn't need to be that big because like except for its swinging, which makes it that's the only part that makes sense for it to be that big. Otherwise, I'm like, why are you so big?
Interesting.
Like, why am I traveling so goddamn far for everything? Like, I don't really need to do this. I started fast traveling after a certain point in that game. I was like, I'm not gonna swing from Harlem down to the bottom of this map right now. Are you kidding me? I'm done swinging. I'm just gonna take the subway, and I do a lot in that game.
That's interesting. Because I feel like of all the things that we've listed, I feel like Spider-Man definitely lends itself to having an open world. But I will agree that I think that Insomniac focused so much on the movement mechanics and like the fighting mechanics that they just didn't put a whole lot of time into making the world interesting.
Exactly.
And I would love to see like what I mean, I certainly hope that they make more Spider-Man games, and I hope to see like a more interesting open world for that.
Yeah, I think there's a good middle ground between the first Spider-Man and Miles Morales. Miles Morales was a little empty, even though I don't hate that. But I'm kind of like, man, there's really not too much to do in this game. And someone might disagree with me, but I think there's like a good middle ground where like you took as much missions as Miles Morales has, but then like sprinkled just something more interesting in the world to be doing constantly. Because otherwise I'm like, who are all these NPCs and why do I care? They're just like random people who want to get a high five on the street, and like otherwise why do you exist? Like it's just kind of like it just feels weird.
And I should have asked this a long time ago, but what does NPC mean?
Non-player character.
Playable.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just a computer character.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody who's not like you.
Wow. The more you know. All right.
Exactly. Or someone else isn't playing. Like if you were playing an MMORPG or something.
What?
Like not another massive multiplayer online role-playing game.
World of Warcraft.
Like if you were playing and another character was like another player, so it's not that person either. It's like literally someone that is just there as part of the world essentially, or like the shopkeep. You go up to the shopkeep and you say, hey, and he goes, here's some of my wares or whatever.
So Brock and Sindri would be those guys.
Those would be non-playable.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay. What about Atreus? Well, I guess he would be playable because you can control him.
You kind of control him, so I guess he's playable, but most of the time he's not playable.
Okay. I didn't know these had terms.
So he's
more of like a game mechanic / character. But technically he's an NPC because you're not really directly controlling him.
Well, you kind of are because you can tell him where to shoot. You can.
Yeah, but I feel like it's like Quiet. Like Quiet in Metal Gear Solid 5 is technically an NPC.
They're more like a weapon. Like they're like a weapon as part of your like arsenal, and you just say, "Hey, do this thing for me."
Okay.
Because I think this one question is really important. I think is the argument for stories or not stories in open world, and I'm really just gonna let Phillip describe why he doesn't believe so.
Okay.
And why? And why I'm just gonna shake my head quietly.
So Phillip's argument
in disagreement
is against stories in open world games. Okay.
Correct.
To clarify, it's not that I don't think that open worlds should never have stories, but I do think that we've reached a point where the limiting factor before in the last like 10 years of like why open worlds needed stories was because the technological capabilities of computers were not there. Like we couldn't just build what are called systemic games that are simulation games. So games like Deus Ex Machina that we haven't actually talked about, because these games are open worlds on a much, much smaller scale. So like Deus Ex Machina is or Deus Ex Human Revolution.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I know what you're talking about.
Mankind Divided, like all those games, like they're built on much, much smaller scales. So the map is very, very small, but it's still technically an open world. But there isn't as much of the original concept behind I can't remember what
Open
they're called.
worlds?
No, they're not open worlds. They're like simulation games. I can't remember what the exact word for them is. But the idea was like to create an open world that had no story, and the player is like free to roam and create and tell their own stories within it. And a lot of them require like systemic mechanics. So a systemic mechanic is like the weather in Legend of Zelda. So like when it rains and you like the rocks get slippery, right, in Zelda, and because the rocks get slippery, you can't climb up them as well. Those things aren't scripted so much as they just happen because things interact with each other. Using electric arrows in the rain causes like your electric arrows to be more devastating in Breath of the Wild because electricity reacts with the water.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And so the idea behind systemic design is to create a game world that is just a bunch of reactions. And ideally, some designers would like to reach a point where we don't actually have to have defined narratives in games. We just have systems where the player goes in and can tell their own stories based on systemic mechanics all throughout the game. One great example, like a modern example, is Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War with the Nemesis system of like they have just like procedurally generated orcs that like every time you kill them the game remembers it, and then every time like they defeat you they have like their own stories going on, and you end up forging these stories through your gameplay experience where you watch orcs rise and fall through the ranks, and you see people like betray each other and team up against you and join you and all these things, and none of them are scripted, but they're like semi-scripted to the point where you get unique experiences every single time that you play, but there's no core narrative, right? And I think that that's where open worlds ultimately are trying to go, because I think that open worlds always detract from their narratives. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's fine. Makes sense. I still wholeheartedly disagree about Witcher 3, and I know I'm not alone on that thought, but that is okay. That if you don't like it, I still feel like you should just play the entire game. Even if you suffer through every minute of it, you should finish it and finish the story and then come back
but
and
like
say whether or not, even if you can't do it, even if it's
50 hours I have put into that goddamn fucking
I
game.
put 200
50 hours, Alex.
I put
That's my third
200
playthrough.
hours.
That's my third time.
I had played it 4 times before that.
150 hours,
I played
Alex.
both expansions.
What more do you need?
What are you talking about? Just beat it. Like, take your time.
I have
150 hours
tried.
spread out. I know, but you're telling me someone who literally did the exact same thing. Like, I kept playing it. I would get to like 10 or 20 hours, and then I would stop. And I'd keep doing that over and over and over again. And I was like, man, I'm going to eventually sit through this. And I did. And I was like, this is amazing. I'm so glad I finally sat through it. Because there's a reason why it won countless Game of the Year awards, and it's still considered one of the best games that's like ever been made. There's a reason why, and I understand your gripes with its story and that, but I just feel like you should finish it. Just finish the damn game.
Mm-hmm.
It's so worth it.
Wow.
It's so worth it.
In all fairness, I feel like Ghost of Tsushima suffers from the same issues, but not as badly.
That's interesting.
I think that Ghost of Tsushima, at least from a narrative perspective, like needs that open world by the idea of Gene is like searching for samurai. He's trying to find like, you know, whoever's left. to like mount this army, and so it encourages you to like search out through the world to try and find more people. But I do think at some point, like, I'm like too obsessed with getting the cosmetic upgrades and the cool side missions and stuff that I start to like not care about the story as much.
Yeah, I guess.
And like maybe
I
that's
just feel
more
like
of an issue with me as a player.
Yeah, because I'm genuinely curious, and to kind of, I guess, wrap things up, is I'm kind of curious with your idea of how games would be played. What then would drive the players? You know, like I think that there are games that have done what you're kind of saying is like Grand Theft Auto 5's online is very similar to I think what you're actually talking about. I think it does exactly what you're talking about. There is no goal. It's just basically go out and do whatever the fuck you want. And it's just open world, and you kind of just explore with your friends and do whatever the fuck you want. Games like Rust, games like...
So in games like those, are there just like constant updates to them?
Sorta. Yeah, I think you're just
a lot
kind
of those games are...
Okay.
You're just living amongst other gamers and doing other things and doing whatever the hell you want. So like Grand Theft Auto Online, Rust, there's something else that's like that. Those two are the big ones that come to mind right now. That they kind of talk about what you're doing. They don't have a narrative, but they're open world, and you can kind of do whatever the fuck you want.
Would World of Warcraft fall into that?
No,
Sorta.
I think like I'm thinking a little bit more grand. Like I'm talking like in the next 10 years, seeing something on the scale that I'm talking about. I'm talking about like a fully fleshed out narrative, but it's generated. Like it's not planned out. And I think that we're moving towards that like more and more with games that are having design aspects that are more procedurally generated and randomly generated. We're just not quite there yet. I think that the way that you are seeing like open worlds with multiple endings is kind of starting to hit
that's interesting.
Closer to what I'm talking about. But like think like multiple endings, but like times 100. Like there's that game Detroit Become Human. It's not an open world, but it has like the script for it is something like 2,000 pages long.
Holy shit.
Because there are so many alternate routes to take through and like so many different ways to go about the story. And I think that that kind of open-endedness in your story is ripe for having an open world.
Interesting.
Yeah, maybe. I played Detroit, and yeah, I don't know. That's interesting to think about that, how that could work. But I'm maybe it could. Well, I think I'm gonna wrap it up there. I know producer Leatrice is
You're just pissed off.
looking at the clock and probably not. We went pretty long on this one, and I could keep going, but I'll stop it here. I guess last thing, any final thoughts before we move on to the end?
At
of the outro?
I don't like open worlds.
Okay.
Yeah,
Phillip doesn't like
I feel
open
like I'm in
worlds.
the same camp. I feel like games should have some kind of story. At least personally, I don't think I would be one to just. I don't care. You can at me if you want. At One for Safety, Instagram, Twitter, all of it.
No, don't add us. No, do this personal.
You can at me at VMN_direct on Instagram. But yeah, I mean, I really don't care for unlimited gameplay. I want a story at the end of it, so that's where I stand.
I just like all video games if they're good. And if it requires an open world, then I'm okay with that. If it doesn't require an open world, I'm okay
Although
with that too.
I do see value in what Phillip was saying with like having multiple endings. Like I can see the value in that. Like I think I would play a game like that to see the variety of endings, you know. I just don't see.
No, you wouldn't.
You don't think I would?
Trust me, if someone who played Detroit and got to my ending, I immediately turned it off and said, "Fuck this game."
But I
was so angry
one
with my ending.
You don't think
I wouldn't do it again. I wouldn't go back and redo all that shit again to get to another ending. I saw it ended. I was like, "Fuck this game." I was so mad. It ended in a really terrible way. I had a really terrible ending, and I was really careful. I was so careful with my ending. I was like, I'm gonna make everyone's gonna survive. Hopefully, it's gonna be great. And then it was terrible.
Interesting.
I was very upset. I wouldn't go back and experience that all again and spend, because that shit's long as fuck too. So if we're gonna talk about length, I played like 10 hours of that game. I'm gonna play that game 10 hours again each time I want another ending. Hell no. That's terrible.
I played The Witcher for 50 hours and
Yeah.
didn't even finish it. I didn't even
I
get
know,
halfway
but then-
through.
You're talking about 10 hours, the same story over and over again, just to get one thing different and go, oh, I'm going to change that one choice. But I'm still seeing the exact same choices. So that repetitiveness is not cool. It's like, it's like you can see like a little bit of difference. Like, oh, maybe I went this way instead of that way. And it's a little bit different. But like, there's still a sort of linearness to Detroit. Sorry, Moses. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm just speaking because I was really upset
No,
about
it's
Detroit
okay.
when I played because my
I'm all here for the outbursts. It's all good.
Though I agree, I think it's a very interesting idea, but not in the scheme, not in the way that Detroit does it. I think because you wouldn't want to do it more than one way. I think after a certain point,
Well, all right.
maybe. Sorry, do you want to finish your thought? I'm sorry.
No, that's it.
You sure?
Story. Give it to me. Okay.
Well, thank you everyone for listening to One for Safety and listening to my rambling on about Detroit, as well as all of our ramblings about open worlds. And you can decide for yourself whether you like open worlds and think they need to exist, or don't like open worlds, like Phillip thinks that that maybe we don't need them, or there needs to be a change to them, and eventually there will be an open world that Phillip loves. But before that happens and the years down the line, until then, you can follow us and hear us talk more about other things. You can follow us on any of the social media sites, on Instagram, on Twitter, on our Discord. Those should all be linked somewhere in the description of this, or just like you can find us on any of those sites. We're excited to keep doing this, and until next time, this has been One for Safety.